So thanks for being here, Jana. I know you're so busy right now, and always. I'm so blessed that I was introduced to you. And the reason why is because, you're truly an innovator. So, traditionally people will call you a headhunter or an executive placement firm. You have been in this career for a while. You started your career at such legacy executive placement firms like Korn Ferry and Russell Reynolds. And after a while, you saw this opportunity in Silicon Valley to work with startups and help them find amazing talent. You have your own firm now in San Francisco. And you're still working with like the legacy companies that need to hire because they want more innovative thinkers and diverse. I've been reading a lot about you. You're really a proponent of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So I am happy that you're here. Maybe you could tell us before we begin who some of your clients are.
Sure.
Do you mind?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. And I'll say a couple of things. When we started 6 years ago, we said, you're going to know us for two things. One is digital and the other is diversity, because we always wanted to remain kind of a small and focused firm. What we were doing in the very beginning was working with companies like Airbnb, Pinterest, Warby Parker, Uber, and a lot of those had some similarities in terms of size and stage and kind of growth trajectory. What is interesting 6 years later is those two things are still true, but it's all about how you define your business, because when you say digital, that can apply to companies like Nike, Hilton, SAP, Adobe. All of those have become clients of ours as well. We weren't necessarily anticipating working with the Fortune 100, 200, Fortune 500, whatever. But when they want digital DNA, when they want diverse leadership teams, those two things are really why people want to work with us.
Awesome. Well, it's really interesting that you are a leader and innovator of yourself, and you've seen this white space, which right now, I'm sure one of the things that we have to think about is like, what will be the opportunity set? The financial crisis gave startup entrepreneurs the opportunity to create that culture. So like what's next is something interesting that, that I've been thinking about as well. Can I just say like one little piece of gossip? Is it true? I heard your NPR piece, and are you like really good friends with Sheryl Sandberg?
Yeah, it's actually true. I hate the whole sort of name dropper thing.
Of course. But,
I met Sheryl in, goodness, it probably been, I'm losing track of time here, 2001-ish. She was still in DC. This is before she had joined Google. It's actually a funny, quick sidebar story, which I don't think is in there. But at the time, back in 2001, we were doing a CFO search for Google. Larry and Sergey were still the co-founders. Eric Schmidt was not there yet. So they didn't have their CEO yet. And that's a really difficult time, by the way, to do a CFO search. And so we got down to two finalists, and the board said, we think we're getting close on the CEO search, so just pause for a minute. And in that pause for a minute moment, Larry and Sergey introduced me to Sheryl, who was working for Larry Summers in DC at the time, and said, well, since the CFO search is on hold, we know she's not a CFO, but meet her because we think she could be really interesting here. Did so, absolutely thought Sheryl was phenomenal, and said, you're right, she's definitely not a CFO, but she would be a phenomenal addition to Google. So that's literally how it started, and we've worked together at both Google and Facebook.
Okay, right. I forgot she was in Google. Well, I think she's really stepping up right now. I mean, even in the second week of the cultural narrative that I talked about with the influencers teaching us about social distancing, like she had this beautiful fun little piece where she was washing her hands and teaching us how to wash our hands with her husband. And, they had a lot of scrutiny and a lot of problems against them. And like, they're really showing, they're showing up, Facebook. So let's go back. Sorry, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say the book Option B that she did with Adam Grant. What's interesting, if people haven't seen it, there's elements of Option B. Like, let's be honest, we are all dealing with Option B right now in all of our professional and personal lives. And it was really cool to see sort of an addendum that some of the themes in that book apply to what we're going through today. Anyway.
So like, what would be like the takeaway of that book, would you say?
Basically, the concept, if people haven't read it, around Option B was after the death of her husband, Dave Goldberg.
Right. Yeah.
Basically, the concept being when you are dealt a set of cards, which is not anyone's option A, is how to sort of lean into option B and make it the best it could possibly be. And it's funny, I had thought about it a little bit, and then she and Adam have been on various forms of social media saying, we're going to create an addendum to the book because several of these themes are not just about a spouse dying, but it's actually about all of us dealing with less than ideal circumstances.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's talk about the less than ideal circumstances right now, which I know everybody, wants to hear from you, because many of us on this call actually have been laid off or furloughed, right? Are having trouble working and balancing, and really are scared of it. Or many of us are, employers and bosses. We're not getting our checks. We don't know if we're even going to be relevant or survive. And so you're the expert. Can you tell me about, where's the job market right now? What do we really have to know?
Yeah, let me just start out first of all with just saying to everybody who's, dialed in today, I think this is a difficult and challenging time. And even if we're in jobs and gainfully employed, it's still a difficult time. I think none of us know exactly how to navigate these waters. But the good news is, just like with the coronavirus, we are not in this alone. And so I certainly want to try to do everything I can today and going forward to be kind of a helpful voice. I'll start with just real talk, because I think the way you establish credibility with anyone is that you're willing to speak the truth, right? And as all of us know, the employment market is not strong. And unfortunately, the message I would say, just to start this out, is I actually think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I do think you've got several companies who decided to address it early, maybe even to cut slightly deeper than they thought they needed to. But that is by no means not the case with all companies. You're going to continue to see companies who haven't really dealt with the reality of it yet. And it's going to come, I think, in sort of continuous waves. The other interesting just side note I would say is I've seen 2 downturns before throughout my recruiting career, and I genuinely think this is going to be the worst. So 2001 dot-com bust, 2008, much more broad in terms of various industries being impacted. This is one, and again, I'm not trying to be negative, but this is one where no one comes out unscathed, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. There are certainly going to be companies that will thrive and grow, and sectors that will be majorly innovated and all that kind of great stuff. There are definitely going to be upsides, but for everyone, this is how do we right size this for the economy that we're in today?
Mm-hmm. So if that's the truth, which it probably is, well, you know what? Let me step back. So what are your clients saying to you? Are you getting calls from anybody saying we're not hiring? I even read somewhere, and I don't know if this is appropriate for you, that, executive recruiters or talent recruiters who are in retainer are actually getting furloughed right now too. So when you're speaking to your clients, are any of them asking to fill up some jobs? And what are the ones that they're not filling up, I guess?
It's a real mixed bag, is the honest to God truth about the whole storyline. So there are a few searches for companies that have really struggled where they've asked to put the searches on hold or cancel, one or the other, right? Interestingly enough, it's an interesting sort of, I'll call it leaky bucket, because while some things are going away, there are several new projects that are launching. And it's a wide range of different things, but I'll give you a couple examples. Gaming is particularly hot right now. Anything that has to do with sort of virtual reality, if it has to do with virtual concerts, for example, anything that we would kind of encapsulate under gaming, we've seen a lot of new projects launch in that arena. Anything that you might consider to be biotech, which hasn't historically been necessarily a big area of expertise for us, but when you think about technology, digital innovation, a lot of that's happening in telemedicine, biotech, et cetera. So
like Mary Meeker just said.
Exactly. There's one biotech company that had raised $500 million right before COVID happened, and they have to build an entire team. So there are absolutely going to be pockets of growth, but it is, I really do mean it, I think it's that leaky bucket, right? You continue to see companies that will struggle, that will put recruiting on hold or pause, and there are other companies, you got to find those moments in those places where growth is happening.
Huh. And you were telling me about this cool company, Wave or something like that.
LA, yes.
Yeah, wait, tell me about that.
Yeah. So if people haven't heard of it, I hadn't before. Wave, and it's funny, it's a play off a rave, but this is with Wave AW. The concept behind this is virtual concerts. So you get the artist in studio where there's great quality sound, because I think that's one of the issues, is you want to hear them in their best possible light. But the entire concert goers are virtual. And
But better than Zoom, basically.
exactly. They've just signed artists like John Legend and several others. I mean, they're going to be on a tear because they're very much, and I mean this with great respect, right place, right time. You know, who knew even a month or two ago that this would be such a hot area of growth?
So those are the people who are calling you right now. Who's not calling you anymore or called you before a lot? Not names, like industries.
I mean, you can imagine, right? I mean, companies, for example, that are in anything to do with live events, right? Anything having to do with that, anything to do with hospitality, right? If you think about airlines, hotels, obviously we've all read about Airbnb. I mean, there's a whole host of, I think, pretty obvious sectors that are really struggling right now. But, you know, conversely, who is growing besides the gaming space, healthcare we just talked about, even things, for example, like online bill payments, right? That's anything where everything you're doing is digitally enabled. Think of companies like PayPal and all of the newer incarnations of something like that. Even credit card companies. I mean, some legacy businesses are also interesting enough doing well if they can transition that business into largely digital first transactions.
What about like the big ones like Google? Are they hiring right now or?
I don't know if people saw this. So it was last Thursday, which I'll be honest, I was even a bit surprised by, where Google talked about slowing down and maybe only doing sort of, I'll call it critical hires. And the reason they cited was not necessarily economic, although let's be honest, that is a factor for sure. But what they talked about was their concern about the importance of culture. And they were not too keen on the idea of onboarding people virtually, that if you really wanted to keep that culture strong and robust, you needed to pause or slow down hiring in the hopes that you could then onboard people in person. And again, I'll just say I was surprised by that. It was definitely a bit of a sobering moment, because I didn't expect Google, that is large, that's in a lot of diversified businesses, Google, that's a company where you think of technology, they might be the first, you would think in theory, to say, sure, we can onboard people virtually. But if they start to, I don't know, infiltrate other companies, I worry a little bit that then everyone will say, oh, I guess you can onboard people virtually. I think what we need to be challenged by is we may have to do so. And how do we create awesome ways to do that? I'll give you just a quick sidebar. There's another big legacy tech company who the candidate was concerned because they hadn't, met people in person and was reluctant to accept the offer. Mm-hmm. This person lives about 10 minutes away from the campus. And wow. So it's probably a silly thing in a way, but like I love the creative moments here. She said, I'll meet you. I'll have mask on. I'll stay 6 feet away from you, but it's empty. The campus is empty. So I can at least walk you through for you to visualize some of the spaces that you might work in, if you were to accept our offer. I thought that's sort of creative. Again, like we can't.
Well, that's where I wanted to. That's where I wanted to go. So I know many of us on this call, because many of my clients are like creative thinkers. Most of my clients are media, entertainment, consumer-facing businesses, retail, marketing, and so like for us creatives, like how should we think? I mean, like I don't want to for me, like being a technologist is like being a plumber. I mean, I not that nothing affects the plumbers. It's like, I like I'm cringing by the fact that like those are the only jobs that could be available.
Depends, I think, on even what we define as technology. Because just to be clear, I'm a little bit like Brad on this one. Like we do not do searches for engineers, CTOs, CIOs. That is not our area of expertise.
Okay.
Like more of the go-to-market side of things, the quote-unquote business side of things. But when you think about digital transformation, I think what's interesting is people will think of, that's the CTO or the CIO or the head of engineering, or that's a technology platform solve. And some of it is, but honestly, a whole bunch of that is really, what's the overall business strategy? What's the go-to-market strategy? How well do you know your consumers and where they want to be met and how they want to be met? So there's a whole bunch of that digital transformation work that doesn't sit in quote unquote IT.
Ah, okay. So it's kind of like technology is everything right now. It's like it's just a natural resource that kind of oozes into every, discipline. So you just kind of have to know how to work with those type of people. All right. So let's get some advice if you don't mind. So what do we do now that like we're all going to get fired? I'm sorry. I'm laughing. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh. It's a serious thing. But what do we do? What should we be doing right now?
Let's try to bucket it a little bit because I think there's different levels of impact. I'm going to guess there's probably, I'm making a wild guess here, but I'm going to guess the majority of people on this call are still in jobs, but are probably a bit nervous, right? So there's that group. There's people who might be, for example, asked to go more part-time or take a cut in salary. There may be some people who are furloughed. I mean, I do think there's different dynamics at play here. And yes, some people who are out of work right now. It's a broad spectrum. So I'll try to parse it. We could obviously probably go on for hours if we were to go through each one of those scenarios. But at the highest level, if you're in jobs today, but you're nervous, which by the way, I think would apply to probably a lot of people.
Totally.
Try to do the best you can in that state of being a bit nervous and concerned to give it your all. I mean, we talk a lot about this concept of ownership mentality. I mean, literally pretend it were your company. And if you're looking at how could you continue to raise your hand and contribute, even if you saw, look, there really are needs in X area of my company. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm going to raise my hand to say, I can go get smart on that. I can help. It's that moment where I think when we're fearful, we can either pull back or we can lean in. And the most important thing I can say is not only will it help save your job, it'll help your company continue to thrive and grow if you use this as a moment to really, really lean in. So that's one point as it relates to people who are in jobs today.
And like really think about, because so many of my, people I know, they were miserable before, right? And, this was actually something like, okay, like I couldn't quit myself, but now, it's really time for me to figure out what I want to do next. So I think we use this self-reflection time a little bit. And I think you were telling me some of the things we can be doing is like, editing or developing our LinkedIn profiles, connecting with clients or, people, and just to check in and see how they are without any agenda, right? I think we were talking a little bit about that. So are there any other things that we could be doing right now?
And let's talk even just a little bit specifically about those couple of examples that Brad just mentioned, right? If you think about your LinkedIn profile, it feels like the vast majority of those are title, company, timeframe, and that's about it, right? What would it look like to really enhance that LinkedIn profile? Meaning you're actually adding things in there. What did you accomplish? And by the way, the more specific, the better. The more where you have actual metrics for performance, the better, but putting some of that in there. If you want to add in some special skills towards the end, right? Other areas that people might not anticipate that you could be good at. Some people forget to put not-for-profit boards or even public company boards, private company boards, like all of that stuff belongs on there. So take a little time to spruce it up. Mm-hmm. If you do have time on your hands, whether that means you're employed, partially employed, unemployed, but if you have time on your hands, really use this as a time to learn, right? There's a lot of different free online courses. If you look at things, for example, this just got announced, I think the last couple of days, both Salesforce and Adobe, their big national conference, which you spend money going to, you spend money flying to, they've made it free. So there are a lot of...
Obviously you can't go right now either, so because it's an event, right?
But because so many of these things are virtual, they'll either come at low cost or no cost, and there's a lot of opportunities to find different venues online where you can learn a lot. And Brad also mentioned something else important. Let's pretend, I'll just use this hypothetically. Let's pretend I was really passionate about healthcare, telemedicine, the consumerization of healthcare. And I knew 3 people who worked in that area. Now, granted, they're busy right now. But if I said, can I spend 15 or 30 minutes on a phone call with you to really help myself get smart because my company needs me or the industry needs me or something, people will make time for you right now. And I think it's both because they have more time maybe than usual, most people, But even if they didn't, there's definitely a spirit right now of trying to help lift others up. I know several people who are out of work right now are pleasantly surprised that people are willing to give them the time, because I do think there's a different degree of empathy coming out of this moment
Yeah.
than in the past.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am sure. Well, okay, one last question. What happens if you're on the other side? You're an employer, right? And you're scared that you're going to need to fire or furlough. How can you step up as a good leader right now? And also, how can you deal with your own fears and insecurities and all that?
It's a great question. I mean, what a great time to practice things like over communication, transparency, and communicating more frequently and maybe in smaller doses, right? I mean, for example, we make sure that our teams together on a Zoom 3 different times a week. And we are updating constantly, you know, what our pipeline of business looks like. If a client were to cancel, for example, everyone knows that immediately. Like, I think the one way you get both yourself and the rest of the team feeling as comfortable as possible, and there's no such thing exactly as comfortable right now, but is as much information as you can possibly share. Because, oh, by the way, the more you share, the more your team also knows the health of the business, where you might need help. It's definitely a team sport right now. So the more that you can bring people in under that umbrella and kimono, the better.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to have time for the last few minutes for questions. Do you see an acceleration of gig workers or freelance workers in this new environment?
The quick answer is we haven't seen it yet, but I do think it's coming. And why I say I think it's coming is you'll see sort of this wave that jobs will be eliminated and then companies are going to need people, but they may not be willing or ready yet to bring them on full time. So I do anticipate we're going to see a lot of really interesting and meaty, call them short-term consulting gigs at pretty senior levels even. And the nice part about that is I also would predict that several of those will turn into full-time roles. It's about, I need to fill this role, but I can't afford, or I'm nervous to commit to it fully. So will you come on this journey with me and we'll explore it a bit together? And when we talk about people, individuals who want to learn about new and different spaces, that's also kind of cool because you too get to kind of quote unquote try before you buy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And let's go to the next one. Everybody, send me your questions, please. All right, what about this? From Lisa Bernstein. Jana, can you tell us what you are seeing for summer internships and entry-level hiring for your clients? Lisa's interested to hear any creative ways in which clients are handling their future employees.
Well, just as a quick context setter, we work at the VP level on up. So I just want to at least mention that I'm not an expert necessarily in, call it, entry-level hiring, but just anecdotally, sadly, especially as it relates to summer interns, we've heard, I would say, a very significant proportion of those programs have been canceled for the summer. One interesting bright light, because we talked about Google earlier, probably people saw this, but Google has announced they are continuing with summer interns. They will be virtual. So it's sort of funny in that we talked about they're concerned about onboarding, but in the context of summer interns, they are going to move forward and have these individuals work from their homes, but still have meaty projects over the summer. So it would be nice to see more companies following their lead.
Interesting. So maybe there's an opportunity. See, it's always looking at the white space, maybe like a virtual job fair or something like that. So, that's another thing I've been reading about, right? Like stepping up to do things that like for the last 10 years, we've been talking about innovation. We need to transform the workplace. But again, I was talking about the last decade as the decade of the thought leadership, not cultural leadership. Stop talking, actually doing. And there have been so many innovation projects that have been on hold because of the way that corporations are structured, right? So maybe now is the time to step up, right? And do things that you either were doing before, but your boss put it on the back burner. Like right now might be an interesting time to create some kind of technological platform for your company for recruitment. It's just an idea I got.
No, I think it's really true. It's like a forced innovation or forced flexibility, if you will, right? Like there's going to be a lot of different ways that companies in the past would have been like, yeah, no, great idea, Brad, but no, we're not going to do it. Versus today, Bring it on, Brad. What is it? Let's think about it, because we have to think differently.
Yeah. Okay. And the last question, it is 3:00. I have one for you to kind of pull it all together. How are we going to work in the future? And I mean, do we know? I mean, we're working very differently now.
It's a great question. I think a lot of people will ask questions like, is remote work basically just going to be the mode of the future? And if you say that in the broadest way, I don't think so. No, I don't actually agree with that, because I think also what's happening here is a lot of people are missing the, I don't know, call it real-time collaboration, what I'm trying to say, sorry, the coffee chats, if you will, in the office. So I do think once we're allowed back in the office, a lot of people are going to be glad to do so. But the most positive thing I think that will come out of this is flexibility. People will be allowed to work in different ways. Teams will be more effective at collaborating across different geographies. It'll be interesting, by the way, to see if companies are more flexible about hiring people who aren't in their geography. So right now I'm not talking about, I live in San Francisco and I work remotely from Marin County or something, but I'm going to join a San Francisco based company. I live in Denver and they're going to be okay with that. So it'll be interesting to see if those changes happen.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jana. Thank you everybody for coming. I can't even spell. That makes me actually unvaluable, I guess, right? But I guess you don't need to do that these days. You have spell check. So when you go home tonight, I have a little exercise for everybody to do. Thinking about, because this is a time for self-reflection. How do you want your work life to be in the future now? Your profession, industry, role, are you happy with that? How can some of your skills, maybe you don't want to be, the senior executive of marketing you wanted to do something else, but you don't have the career experience, but you have a particular type of skill set. Maybe you're great with people. Maybe you're good with managing. Maybe you're good at organization. Maybe you're creative. Maybe you understand technology, and how could those skills translate to other jobs of the future? How can your skills translate more as a boss? Are you a good boss? Are you a bad boss? I had lots of people tell me after Pam Kaufman was talking last week saying wow, Pam seems like an amazing boss who checks in. My boss is horrible. He or she had never done that to me. What kind of boss do you want? Do you feel like you should have more balance in your life? Should you work harder, or should you just be complacent with where you are? So I'm going to leave you with that. I love you all. Please tell other people to join this on the free culture class. Like I said I'm going to be doing it for the evolution, or how long we're going to be self-quarantined, to help inspire us all and help us stay smart and knowledgeable and ready for the future. And join me next week. Franklin Leonard, I know, is going to be awesome. And any questions, you could email me directly at brad@zeitguy.com. And have a great day. And like I always say, keep learning.